Hey there, and welcome back to the Transformers the Game Low Res vs. High Res series. As you recall, in the last episode, we covered both the Cybertron Autobot and Cybertron Decepticon maps, and suffice to say, one version was objectively lacking. And now, we are going to wrap up this series, for the time being anyway, with a detailed analysis of the G1 characters. This episode is going to be pretty packed with content, so I won't have time to cover anything else. However, I am going to leave the door open for this series in the event something else comes up. For now, though, this seems like a good place to leave it. Well, let's go ahead and get this show started with G1 Optimus. And then we'll just go down the list here. Alright, let's roll. So, starting us off, we have G1 Optimus, who, for the first time, actually shares the same model and textures as the high-res version, but they have been substantially scaled down. We'll run through those later, but first, let's run through a basic analysis here. One of the more obvious distinctions is that high-res is much more reflective compared to low-res. That is in no doubt relation to the inclusion of normals for the high-res Optimus. Now we can see just what difference normals play in a character. You lose a lot of detail with the normals missing. Well, let's get up a little closer and see what else has changed. One of the first issues I can see is that low-res Optimus has a bit of a gap near his head. I imagine this guy has more two-sided shading problems, as we have seen on so many others, so that shouldn't be too unexpected. I do see that his chest glass is non-transparent in low-res, compared to high-res, which lets you see inside his chest. So that's a neat addition. Ooh, but low-res has a new texture for the Autobot logos on his shoulders, making them much sharper compared to high-res, which is of course skinned onto the base texture itself. There isn't a whole lot different otherwise. It's mostly just a huge loss of detail due to the texture being so scaled down. Still, I find it interesting that they kept the models the same for Optimus here, but not any of the main characters. Well, okay, not a whole lot for robot mode. Let's move on to his textures next. As I said, the textures between low-res and high-res are exactly the same, just substantially scaled down. High-res has two textures, the main body, which is 512 by 512, and the inner parts texture, which is also 512 by 512. Comparing that to low-res, which has been cut down to 256 by 128 for both the main body and the inner parts, so they cut it down substantially. Of course, low-res also has the addition of that new Autobot logo texture, which is 32 by 32. So that's some pretty small stuff. Still, kind of cool that they included that. Well, that's pretty much all there is to cover for robot mode. Let's roll on over to vehicle mode. Which is, again, the exact same model, just with lower resolution textures and less detailed shading. And I suppose the different wheels as well. You can see that the glass is completely solid in low res, but is semi-transparent in high. Huh. It looks like the back of the truck has some simpler geometry in low. It looks like high has a bit more of a split in the back compared to low. Other than that, though, the only other distinction I see is the new Autobot logo texture on the sides. Everything else looks about the same. Either way, not a whole lot different here. Let's head over to textures. Once again, the textures between high-res and low-res are exactly the same, just with a significant decrease in resolution. High-res, again, has two, one for the main vehicle, and one for the inner pieces, which are again both 512 by 512, and low res is cut down to 256 by 128. So yeah, same texture, just squashed way down. Okay, that is all for G1 Optimus. Let's move on to the next character. Next up, we have Robovision Optimus Prime. Okay. I can see a few distinctions, but the basic color layout seems the same. Let's get up closer and see what differences can be found. Well, first and foremost, one of the most obvious changes I can see is that low-res does not have the brown hip plates that high-res does. I really don't know why they added brown on him to begin with. I always found that odd. Okay, so the chest door windows are a bit of a different shape. Actually, the entire doors look to be an entire different shape. They seem a bit shorter, and those windows are kind of split a little bit differently. They go down a little further on one side, compared to just being a straight line in high. Legs seem to follow the same color pattern as far as I can tell. Might be a bit of a bolder blue, then again, it could just be the reflection playing with him. Either way, basic color pattern seems pretty much the same. Oh, but low-res has a yellowish Autobot insignia on the shoulder pad. It looks like the movie logo of the Autobot symbol. It's really low res, so it's hard to tell, but high res does not have that at all. Okay. Some interesting changes there. Let's move on to textures. So, low res has 3 textures. One for the main body, which is 256 by 256. Yeah, there you get a better look at the Autobot logo, which looks like a golden version of the movie Autobot logo. He also has a wheel texture for his wheels, though obviously, which is 64 by 64. And he has this. I don't know what the heck this is for, but it's 32 by 16, so I have no clue what that is. Well, moving over to high res, which has 3 as well. One for the main body, another for the arms and the legs, and the interior, which is shared with the default Optimus. So, pretty drastic distinctions in texture quality, no doubt. Okay, let's move on to vehicle mode. So here we have Robovision. Whoa! Okay, this dude is different. Way different. Wow. Okay, so as far as I can tell, this version of Optimus is based upon his Kenworth concept art, as you can see by the logo on his grille. I guess that was his working design, but they swapped it up for the Peterbilt later on. So we've already mentioned the Kenworth logo on the grille. The front bumper is a bit more curved compared to high res. Looks like there's a license plate on the front bumper as well. And there's some different colored lights on the bottom, swapping between orange and red. His front fenders are blue in low res, but red in high. I guess they decided to match that design for robot mode, as his legs were fully blue. High res didn't do that and kept the front fender red. But the underside of the fender looks blue in high as well, so maybe they just forgot to make it blue? I'm not sure. Oh, weirdly, high-res has the lights as solid black. I don't know what that's about. And the Autobot logo on the grille is yellow and black. Definitely some questionable choices for this guy in high res. The windows have that same split that we saw in robot mode, where one side is kind of angled lower than the other. And if we look at him from the back, whoa, we get even more. So aside from the rear fenders being red in low res and blue in high, we have a completely different rear section for him. That rear shield, whatever that's called, completely gone in low res. Instead, you get a few bars and an Autobot insignia. He's even got some different colored wiring there. And this has to be one of the most drastic changes I've seen between low and high. Wow. Alright, let's check out textures. Low res, again, has 3 textures. One for the main vehicle, which is 256 by 256, which is not too terrible. You can make stuff out pretty well. He's also got the same wheel texture, and this thing, whatever it is, at high res only has 2. One for the main vehicle, and the other for the interior. So yeah, pretty drastic differences there. Alright, well that rounds up Robovision Optimus. Let's soar on to the next character. Up next, we have G1 Megatron, who again is sharing the same model and textures between high and low res. Well, there isn't a whole lot different here, since the models are the same. However, I can see that low res is much more reflective and shiny compared to high res. Well, let's zoom in closer and see if anything stands out besides the shading. Well, his fusion cannon is missing quite a bit of detail near the rear of the scope. There's like no obvious lines there, probably because he's lacking normals, of course. I guess to be fair, the high res is a bit shiny in some areas, but still not nearly as obnoxious as low res. Aside from the excessive shininess, nothing looks that different. Oh god, the legs are terrible. It's way too over the top. Ugh. Yikes. So I guess, all in all, it's probably one of the most consistent designs between high and low res. Well, taking a look at textures, we again have the same thing. High res has 2 textures for the entirety of Robot, the upper body and lower body, both of which are 512 by 512. And low has the same 2 textures, but at 256 by 256. So yeah, not really anything to mention here. Well, since there is no vehicle mode to cover, I guess we'll just head straight on to the next character. Up next, we have G1 Jazz. Huh. Okay. I can see a few standout distinctions already. Let's get up close so I can run through them. So, interesting thing about the low-res Jazz model, evidently the, blue sections are an entirely different texture compared to what you see on the white, which isn't too surprising if you refer back to the More Than Meets the Eye episode, and that he had barely any color on his textures at all, so I don't know how that dude gets colored, but it would be a freaking nightmare to even try to skin. Getting back on target here, I can see that the low res uses the older head design. Really the older body design, as he's got way less antennas compared to high res, which uses the final CGI head, and his spoiler is the older design. It's very odd that only the high res G1 Jazz uses the final design, and nobody else does from what I can remember. But at least we get one decent model of him. That aside, I see that the bottom section of his chest is completely white in low res, but is red in high res, which I believe high res would be correct. I can't recall if he had red there in vehicle. We'll have to check. Okay, so it looks like there are stripes on one shoulder in low res, but on both sides in high. Moving down to the legs. Ooh, okay. Low res has some stripes on the ankle armor that high does not. Looking at him from the back, low res has no jazz text on the side armor, whereas high res does. But I don't believe high res is mirrored, so it is backwards on one side. Huh, so low res only has colored stripes on one part of the foot on the right. That's odd. Seems like this low res version got the short end of the stick, because it is kind of sloppy. Whereas high res, high res went up and beyond, at least for some sections anyway. Okay, well, I have to give all the points to high res for this one, because it just looks so bloody good. Still not what I would have done for a G1 design, but I'm babbling on. Let's check out textures. So, low res has 4 textures. One for the main body, which is 256 by 256. As I said, has barely any color. Yeah, there is no blue to be found anywhere. I couldn't even tell you where most of that color even goes. He also has a G1 texture for his logos and stripes. That's pretty handy. Kind of wish high-res had that. This would have been another great case of high-res taking advantage of textures like this so you could avoid that mirroring problem. He's also got a wheel texture, which is 32 by 32. And another detailed texture, which is also 32 by 32. But I imagine that's used more in vehicle mode than robot. Well, moving over to high res, we have 3 main textures. The main upper body, which is 90% solid white. So, good luck finding anything here, unless you're using the spec or normals to find something. You'll have a lot of guesswork. There is also the arms and legs, which isn't much better, because the majority of it is solid white. And there is the interior texture, which differs just slightly from the default jazz texture, mainly in the facial region. He's got a more accurate face compared to the concept one, so its changes are minor, but they are there. But it would be a pain to sift through, I'll tell you that much. Well, I think that's all there is to cover for robot mode. Let's roll over to vehicle mode. And rolling on in, we have G1 Jazz in his... Whoa! Hot dang! Oh, that is a beauty! Oh, let's zoom in on that. Okay, not gonna lie, I am seriously in love with low res here. Guy, those colors just pop. Oh, he is so vibrant. I love it. If you compare him to high res, the color's a lot more flat and just doesn't look as sharp and clean as that. Not to mention the unmirrored logos he has. But low res, oh my goodness, I love this. This thing is gorgeous. Oh. Well, it does seem that the red section on the front is correct. Guess I just forgot it in robot mode. Okay, aside from the vibrantly colored stripes, the Pontiac logo is actually modeled in low res, but is just a texture in high. That's a shame. There's also that divot on the left fender, which is modeled in low res, but again, it's just a texture in high. Man, the vehicle mode for this guy was really lucked out on. I look at the high res car and it feels dull. If you look at low, it just pops. God, that sharpness is just gorgeous. I love this. This is just wonderful. And it even gets better when you check it out from the back, because low-res has some Pontiac Solstice logos on the back that high-res doesn't even have. God, high-res let me down bad. I've never seen a low-res vehicle mode look this hot, but oh my goodness, it's gorgeous. Okay, I'm enough swooning over G1 Jazz. Let's check out textures. So, low-res has 4 textures. One for the main body, which somehow has even less color than the robot texture. God, look at that. There's barely anything there. How are you supposed to color this guy? It's ridiculous. And it's at 128 by 128, so... God, that's just... Wow. He also has the same G1 texture as we saw in robot mode with the stripes and logos. And he's got another that has his gas cap and Pontiac Solstice text. And he has one for his license plate. So some nice bits of detailing there. Moving over to high res, which has 2 textures. One for the main vehicle, and one for the interior. So, a bit of a fun fact for the high-res Jazz. He's got a bit of a, I want to call it a bug, but I imagine it was intentional. So as you can see at the top there, he's got 2 sections for his forwards. One for the opposite side, and one for the center. But the way these textures are positioned, they overwrite his side window. And if you look carefully at it in-game, you could see that. It's not painfully obvious, thankfully, since the window is semi-transparent, it blocks most of it. But this character in particular would have really benefited from a logo texture like low-res used. Okay, well, that's all for G1 Jazz. We got one more G1 character to do. Let's soar to him and check him out. Screaming in for our final G1 character, we have G1 Colors Starscream. Who's got some interesting distinctions compared to his high-res counterpart. Let's see what we're working with here. So first and foremost, low-res is actually gray as opposed to the high-res blue. That's automatically winning points in my book, but what else has he got? Let's start up from the head and go down from there. So, interestingly enough, low-res already has a quite unique distinction. The top of his head is black, whereas high-res is just plain blue. Or blue-gray, whatever you want to call it. That's interesting. He does have the red stripes on the front of the chest, but it's kind of weird with high-res since he has the squadron logo that kind of gets included in. I don't know why the underside of that went past the logo. Not a call I would have made. Interestingly enough, his shoulders in low-res seem to follow the Revenge design a bit more than what high-res did. He's got those blue edges on the front of the pad, whereas high just kept them as bluish-gray. Really almost black because of the scarring. The knee pads have had their colors reversed. Low-res has blue on the top and gray on the bottom, while high-res has the grayish blue on the top and blue on the bottom. That actually looks like a bit of a stronger blue in general. Aside from that, the blue on the ankles seems to go a little higher in high-res, and not quite as far in low-res. The back isn't too much different. Layout seems to be pretty much the same, although an interesting fun fact about high-res G1 Color Starscream is that he has terrible two-sided shading. Which is weird because regular Starscream does not. So, I don't know what the heck happened, but somewhere down the line his head shading got botched. And it's really apparent and really annoying. Low-res has that as well, but I'm not really surprised. tons of the low-res characters do. But solely because I hate the high-res blue so much, I'm gonna give the points to low-res for this one, just because I think it looks so much better, even though it's still crude with the two-sided shading. But overall, not too different. Let's take a look at textures. Low res only has one noteworthy texture, and that is for the main body itself, which is a bit messy, but not the worst I have seen by any means. It's pretty defined for the most part. High res has three, one for the upper body, one for the arms and legs, and another for the interior, which surprisingly isn't shared with the default Starscream, as you would probably expect. Neither one is too terrible to work with, but I'd probably still prefer high just because, you know, there's more of it. Well, that's all for Robot. Let's soar on into jet mode. Already basing this off the knowledge I have of the original low-res Starscream has already impressed me. Let's take a closer look. So there isn't a whole lot to write home about here. The basic color pattern is the same between versions. You've got the red on the edges. You've got the blue at the engines. You do have a blue stripe in the middle of the jet in low-res that you do not have in high-res. But outside that, not a whole lot different here. One huge point I will give to low-res is that they took away the camo job for low-res Starscream. That impresses me. That was a step that I'm surprised they actually took. Because obviously the camo job doesn't really translate well for a design like this, but the fact that they made that choice, huge points. Well done. There's also some slight differences with the basic design. High-res has that line pattern near the front of the jet that low-res doesn't have at all, so it's kind of a mixed bag here. High-res as a whole is a better model, but low-res having the initiative to take away the camo job and really including the camo job to begin with just deserves some praise, no doubt. But yeah, other than that, there isn't a whole lot to mention here. Okay, on to textures. So, low-res Starscream only has one texture, and that is for the entirety of the jet itself. It's a bit rough, but with a little trial and error, you could probably figure your way around it and make something nice out of it. High-res has two, one for the main jet, and another for the interior. So yeah, nothing really special to mention here. But I think high-res is a bit easier to work with just because all his parts are nicely defined. But that's all there really is to say. So, that is all of the G1 characters covered. However, we have one more character to cover. He's not a G1 character, heck, he's not even used in the base game, but he is worth covering all the same. And wrapping it up with our final low-res versus high-res comparison, we have Autobot Ratchet. Huh. Seems to be roughly the same model and textures between high-res and low-res. Huh. Well, let's zoom in for a closer look to be sure. Now, obviously, low-res has another terrible transparency problem, as we probably aren't surprised by. Yeah, it's pretty rough, but I do believe this is the same model and these are the same textures. Just extremely scaled down. Well, reduced resolution aside, something seems a bit off with his face. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something looks wrong. It's like the eyes stick out way more, and the section around that is just so dulled out that it isn't even noticeable anymore, I think. Oh, actually, the lights on the chest are much brighter in high-res, but are much duller and darker in low-res. Continuing on the subject of lights, It seems that he's missing the lights on his front bumper, because I don't see sections for them there, like I do for high-res. There's also something funky going on in the interior section of his chest, almost as if some pieces are missing. It's hard to tell. This guy was not optimized well. Moving a little lower, we can see a whole lot more loss of detail in his hips. It looks like there's definitely something in the interior missing, probably related to the transparency problem, because it is horrible with him. From the back, well, you can tell it's meant to be the same model, but guy, the transparency is beyond awful for him. I really don't know what happened here, but it is terrible for him. Yeah. This guy could have been good, but between the terrible texture resolution and freaking awful transparency problem, he's got to be one of the worst. Which is surprising since he uses the high-res assets for the majority of his being, so something went horribly wrong. Well, let's take a look at textures, why don't we? So, looking at textures, low-res has 5, 3 of which do indeed seem to be the same as the high-res textures. However, they have been cut down to 128 by 128. If they were 256 by 256, they might have been alright, but 128? No. Anyway, he's got one for his upper body, another for the arms and legs, and another for the interior. Then he's got 2 additional ones for his wheels, and a unique optic texture, which is bright light blue, compared to the darker purple color we're all used to for everybody else. Kind of weird that only Ratchet has this. Well, moving over to high-res, he only has 4. The same upper body, the same interior, and... oh! We actually do have a slight difference with textures here. The arms and the legs have been slightly tweaked between low and high-res. It seems that low-res has cut the wheel section out and added some transparent areas instead. Huh. Then that would explain the new wheel texture that low-res has. Wonder why they cut it. I guess they didn't want to model those extra details, they just went for the transparent route. Huh. Okay. That's all there is to say for robot mode. Let's roll on over to vehicle mode and see what awaits us there. So here we have Ratchet in his Hummer mode. Okay, I can already tell there are a few slight differences to be found here. Let's get him up close and see what we've got. First, let me apologize for the rough consistency between angles. I don't know what happened, but somehow things got a little off course between resolutions. Don't know how, don't know why. We're just gonna have to work with what we've got. So, from what I can tell, low-res Ratchet seems to be roughly based on the high-res version, but seems to have been split in half, at least texture-wise. I'm sure we'll see that in more depth once we cover the texture itself, but for now, I can see that his side logos are quite a bit sharper compared to the high-res, which has those textured on the main texture itself. Fortunately, unlike other characters, he has text for both sides, so none of his text is mirrored. The basic setup seems to be the same, though low-res again has another terrible transparency problem, mainly on the inside of the vehicle, because you can like see straight through it on one side. Yeah. But we do have some noticeable issues on the back. Not only does the low-res have more obvious transparency issues with those rear guards, or whatever they are, but he has 2 logos on the rear of the vehicle. There should only be 1. So, for whatever reason, they didn't make that logo part of the new texture map for the other logos, which is weird. And that fire department text on the back doesn't look correctly positioned either. However, Hi-Rez isn't innocent on this either. That section on the back has his UVs completely flipped around, so that everything there appears backwards. Now, you can fix this with a little texture work, but yeah, I guess they just forgot. Low-res is also missing the 681 on the rear bumper. I guess they didn't include text for that either. They have the 681 on the top left there, but not on the back. So yeah, kind of a mixed bag here, but I think everything considered, I've got to give the points to Hi-Rez, just because they didn't mirror him, and you can actually get everything you need, unlike Low-Res, which just did the back so poorly. So, mixed bag, but Hi-Rez wins this one. Let's check out textures. So, we're going to start with high-res textures this time, just to get an idea of how different the low and high-res versions are between each other. High has two, one for the main vehicle, which, as you can see here, is nicely set up. Everything is nicely defined, and he has all his areas non-mirrored, which I always appreciate when models do this. Just makes skinning so much better. He also has an interior texture with his wheels and cages and stuff. You know, a lot of bars there, but nothing too bad. Low-res, however, has three. First, there is the main body, which, yeah, does indeed seem to be the same as the high-res, but it has been split up. So there's only one half of the texture. And it looks like they merged the interior along with that. I guess that makes sense. Still, you couldn't just take out that logo on his rear section there and, you know, put it on the texture, as you will see here. I mean, I guess it's a bit of a tight fit, but come on. You can just up the resolution a little bit. You could have at least added the white 681. There's plenty of room for that. I mean, all things considered, the low-res texture isn't terrible. It's a pretty good adaptation between high and low. In fact, it's kind of similar to what Revenge of the Fallen did. But still, I much prefer high-res solely because, you know, you aren't confined to any mirror textures at all. And with that, we have covered the final character for our low-res versus high-res comparison. Let's wrap it up. Alright, and there you have it. That is officially a wrap on the low-res versus high-res series. At least for the time being. That was a frickin' pain to edit and put together, but I think it was a fascinating experience nonetheless. Well, with that now completed, I'm actually going to be taking a leap into the past to update some of my older content, because they are sloppy as frick. Seriously, those are in drastic need for an overhaul. So, we'll be returning to that whenever. I have no idea when, but it is long overdue. So, it's gonna be better, it's gonna be good, you're all gonna love it, maybe, probably, I don't know, probably not. Alright, well, that'll do it for this video, and for the low-res versus high-res series for now. Again, possibly might return to it if something new crops up, but till it does, we're gonna leave it here. Alright, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you back in the past. Till then, G1 Jazz's car is low in the best way possible. Whatever the frack that means.